I want to talk a little bit about student learning objectives in terms of elementaries too. Today is just to get used to writing them. We have not determined vendor assessments for subject areas that have those vendor assessments. So we're not getting down into the nitty-gritty details. That's something that we have to work out once we get a student learning objective committee up and running. Today is just to come to some understanding about the process, why we're doing them, and how to write them for areas that you don't have vendor assessments, for areas that aren't value added. But at any time, we want everybody to be able to understand what that process is, okay? Now, we are very fortunate on staff to have our high school assistant principal, who is a jack of all trades, Norm Potter, who, when he worked in Ashtabula, did some work with the student learning objectives. So we have an in-house trainer who has worked very hard to prepare for today, and I'm going to turn it over to him right now.
All right. If you did not pick up the, I'll pick up my voice on. If you did not pick up the three items over on the table over there, you have an agenda, you have your student learning outcome rubric, and your student learning outcome comments. We'll be referring to those a little bit here and there. So if you haven't picked those up, go ahead and grab those right now, and then I'll get started.
Mr. Potter,
Yeah.
would it be okay if you spoke in the microphone just so I can get it on the camera better? Thanks.
Is that better?
Yeah, thanks.
Ooh. Do I need to stay in the front too?
No, you can go anywhere with the wired.
That'll be fine. Like on a leash. All right, you'll notice that on the agenda, I have quite a bit of work time built in for you. I'm not going to talk to you for 3 hours. I don't want to, first off. But also the value in this is the actual work that you'll do together with your colleagues to make sure this works well. A little background first. My stance on state things that are mandated, I've worked in 3 different states, and we all know that every state I've worked in, things change from one day to the next. I've actually been in slow training where one day, or one person says one thing and their counterpart says just the opposite. So we know that the state sometimes, they're not sure what they're doing either. All I can say is that this process that we work through with the SLOs does tie in well with the OTES process, your evaluations, and also helps with the collaboration at each grade level. So if nothing else, the collaboration time you're going to get today and the overview of your core curriculum really will help you be better in the classroom. So take it at value of this is a learning thing for your kids and this is going to make it better overall. And for those that have been through the OTES process, you know that you have that data piece that's in almost every part of the evaluation. The SLOs will help you with that data piece. So if that's something you were missing prior, you'll have it now. So again, they go hand in hand very well. Whether that was the intent of the state or not, I don't know, but let's just say it was and we'll call it good. So on the agenda, you can see we're going to do a basic overview. We're going to focus on the standards themselves. I hope you brought your core curriculum standards. And again, no matter what you feel about core curriculum, I saw the value in those when we lived out in Utah for 2 years. We moved from Michigan, where I worked for 20 years in middle school, grades 5 through 8, a teacher, a principal, a curriculum director for a district. I get out to Utah, they didn't have standards like we have standards out in the Midwest. They were actually 2 years behind my son's education when we moved out there. And when they were fighting core curriculum, because they knew if that was going to be installed in their schools, they'd be so far behind, it would make them look really, really bad. So I understand the value in why we need to have these core standards across the board. When we get into our core standards, we'll then get into our group work so we can start deciding which standards are the most important standards to look at each grade level. We'll look at some assessments, and I'll have examples for all of this. Then we'll actually start our development of our assessments. And that's going to be the process that's going to be a little bit more difficult, but again, it all makes sense in the end. And then we'll talk about data, we'll wrap it up. Again, we have about 2 hours of work time. So first off, a little bit of background about myself. When I came to Lakeside, I had worked for 20 years in middle school, like I said, grades 5 through 8. I was hired at Lakeside to be a teaching coach. They have been on academic review by the state for a very long time now, and they needed somebody to step in, and it's actually a grant position where we have somebody in every building that helps them, specifically with SLOs, differentiation curriculum development. So when I get there, what my job was, they take all the evaluations that have already happened because they've been in the OTES process for 2 years already. I took every teacher that had been evaluated not so well, and I had to help them get up to speed. Writing SLOs was a big part of this. The other part of that was I had to work on differentiation with everybody. So in those areas that we're talking about, that's sort of my area of special expertise, not an assistant principal. Don't like doing that, but that's the job I have. The curriculum part is where I like to be. So when it gets to that point, if you have questions, feel free to ask. I've been through this process for a full year, writing the tests, doing the pre and post assessments, setting up the growth measures, which we won't talk about today because that gets a little complicated, but we will talk about it just slightly. So let's get into this PowerPoint and go from there. All right, so starting off, there are two things that I look at in every classroom that I go into, the art of teaching that the teacher has and the science of teaching. Almost every classroom I've been in, the art of teaching consists of the teacher being able to control and have rapport with their kids, how you handle daily things that come up, you know, the things that are sort of the things that aren't measured up really well in the OTES. That art of teaching is good here. We have good rapport with our kids and the observations that I've made. The science of teaching is this data stuff that we have to do according to the SLOs. It sort of proves that we're good teachers, and that's how the state is going to hold you accountable. But realistically, if you have the control of your classroom and you have the rapport with your kids, the data part is the easy part. It's just a little bit different type of work that you have to do. So if you look at it that way, if you know you have your classroom under control and that your kids are learning, then you just have to have these numbers to prove it. So when we talk about the SLOs and the OTES, I told you before that they go hand in hand. The SLOs will give you the data that you need to get that part of your OTES to accomplish, because some of you, that might be the only thing you're lacking, you don't have the data. If you recall in the very first part of that rubric, they said, do you have measurable goals for your classroom when you walk in? I don't know how many people hit that, but I know that at the high school we struggle with that one in particular. Very few people have a measurable goal every time they do a lesson. Now, whether you have a measurable goal for every lesson or for a unit, that's going to be up to your administration and how they view that. But again, this is the data part that all ties it together. Once you have the data, the other part of the OTES process that people were struggling with was the differentiation piece and how to do it on a daily basis and not be overwhelmed by it. So if you're looking at the data that you gather from your pre-test, then you'll be able to determine where your kids are at and then accordingly move them along at their pace to make sure you reach their goals. So that differentiation piece, again, will tie in based on the data. And the last one, and this is what today is all about, collaboration with your colleagues. At Lakeside, every teacher was required to meet with me once a month, which doesn't seem like much, and it's probably more than they wanted to do though. And then their staff, their grade level, had to meet with me once a month also. So they had to meet with me twice a month during their conference time. During that collaboration, at first it was, they fought it, they didn't want to do it. But as they got into it and they were actually able to talk to their colleagues, the ideas that came out between them were more valuable than anything I could have ever said. So today, when you have your time to talk with other grade levels from other schools, take advantage of that. Just because you have the same standards doesn't mean you approach it the same way. And if you have an open mind going into it, and you're willing to use some of the other things that people have already developed, then your job isn't to reinvent the wheel. It's just a matter of gathering everything together and putting it into a nice clean package. So feel free when you have this collaboration to take your time. And if I say we have 45 minutes, if you need an hour, if it's valuable time, we'll use the hour. It really is important to have those discussions. When you write your SLO and you come up with your common assessments, second grade will have a common assessment for reading, let's say. Then we have to make sure that we all agree to that, because if you're not part of that process and you have this test in front of you and now you have to use that as your assessment, you're not going to be happy about that. So you want to have your voice heard in all these assessments and how we move forward. Okay? Questions on anything so far is pretty basic, not difficult. There's my favorite cartoon. This was actually on my algebra cartoon, or every algebra test I took in 8th grade from my algebra teacher. I sort of feel that way sometimes when the state gives us things. You know, they want us to do all this work, but they don't tell us exactly how to do it. So that fits in pretty well. And Mrs. Finney gave me that back in 8th grade. I'm a Geneva product, by the way. Don't hold that against me. All right. Again, the basics. How many people feel that they could right now write an SLO? Right here. I was going to say, if you raise your hand, you can't leave, so you might as well stick around. Each of you have to have 2. Now, the nice part is, unless your building has a directive or anything of that nature, you basically can pick what your 2 SLOs are. The student learning outcomes right now, most people assume are just the standards that you are using, that if you have a low standard, you're going to pick that one and try to make them grow. You can also pick a subgroup that's identified by the state. At Lakeside, we had a very high special education population, and that was one of our targeted areas. So we would actually target special education kids to see what their pretest scores were and try to grow them through the process. So you can actually target a group of a subgroup that you want in your classroom. Now, at Lakeside, like I said, we have a very high population of that, so 75% of our kids in any given classroom could have been special education. The other one that we targeted was socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, because that was about 85%. We have a very large number of kids. If you have 3 kids that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, obviously you don't want to pick that, because the numbers are so low. If one kid decides, I'm not going up with the program, then you're out of luck. You just lost your SLO. So make sure you're strategic in a way that you pick what you're going to do. And again, that might be a grade level decision, but that's something that, again, you should discuss. Every SLO will be somewhat unique because you'll have different kids. In your classroom, if you're developing your SLO around your kids and what you think they can grow, the measures may be the same grade level wise, and the assessments will be the same, but your kids are different. So in that regard, you will have a different SLO from the person right next to you that's teaching the same grade level, because they don't have the same kids. And that's the nice thing also. The majority of this you can work on together. It's when you get into your individual classroom, there's a little specific thing that you can change, but it's not an overwhelming thing. Everything you do is data-driven. When you look at these numbers and you look at what you think you do well, this will just, again, help prove or disprove what you think. The data is overwhelming at times if you let it be, and how much is too much data to gather? I got to the point where I just have to put it aside and say, I'm done looking at it, and that's where I move forward. But sometimes you'll just say, here's what I need to know, and if you've been teaching for a while, you know what your kids are good at and what they grow at in your classroom. Take advantage of that knowledge, of your prior knowledge, to come up with a plan. If you know they're horrible at measurement when they walk in your door and they can do measurement really well by the time they leave, that might be one of your SLOs, but now you have to just figure out how you're going to prove that. So start thinking in your mind what they come in low with and what they leave with, and that's where you should start looking for ideas. In talking with specialized teachers, like when we get into the middle school, if they're teaching Greek history, for instance, in one of their social studies classes, they come in with nothing, usually, and then they feel they should be 100% when they're done. That's not realistic to say that every kid's going to get 100% of the Greek mythology in their learning curve. So you have to make sure that you set those measures accordingly. Be reasonable. Like I said, the grade levels will determine the standards and the assessments, and teachers will develop their SLOs with support from the departments or the grade levels, and also the committee that Angela was talking about. The committee that has to be set up by the district oversees everything. Now, I don't know who's going to volunteer or who's going to be put on that committee, because to read every SLO from every teacher in the district or in your building, that's crazy. But that's something the state wants us to do. And then we send them off to state where they have to read all of them. And they have, what, 5 people in their department? So I don't know how that's actually going to happen. So again, this is one of those things I just talked about earlier. The state may not have a plan on how they're going to handle all these SLOs coming in at one time. So when the committee is formed, whoever that committee is, there has to be a grade level expert or a subject level expert on that thing. So you might be the expert for your own SLO, which is, again, crazy, but that's how sometimes it works. All right, so those are the basics. Now, when you look at the handouts that I gave you, let's look at the template first, this one. This is a template that you'll have to be very familiar with when you go through it. And on that template, you'll have all these areas that you'll have to fill out. The ones that I coded in gold or yellow, whatever that color is, those are things that you could do before your class is even formed. So not knowing who you're going to have in your classroom next year, you can come up with this information. You can start gathering trend data, and trend data being How did they do on their past OAAs? What were their grades from last year? Any standardized test that they may have taken that helps you in your subject area. What was your class like this year? If you could give an exit exam, what did you learn from the exit exam from this year's class? So you know how much they've grown in your class somewhat. Any information that you can put together that helps you prove what you want to prove, that's your trend data. And you don't need to have your kids for next year in the room to do that. Student population, that's the one you'll have to fill out once they get there, because again, you don't know how many kids are on IEPs, you don't know how many kids are socioeconomically disadvantaged, you don't know how many are minority, you don't know that information yet. Interval of instruction, when do you teach it? From August to when? So I know that you can't do the entire year because you can't wait till June to get your data. So it would be probably from August to April for most of you. At the high school, we have to do a semester's worth because we do a whole class in a semester. So your interval of instruction, you know that prior, and you can figure that out. The content and standards, or the standards and content, you'll figure that out today because you're going to pick out what are the most important standards at your grade level that you're going to focus on. The assessments, we are going to start the process today. You're going to have your pre-assessment hopefully done very soon. And we'll get into the depth of that, how that works, but you can have a pretty good start on that today also, if I give you enough time. The growth targets we aren't going to touch today. You could probably have those done, but again, that's a bigger discussion on how much should a kid grow in your classroom if they score a 0 on your pretest, and how much would they grow if they scored an 80 on your pretest. To set up those tiered growth measures takes a little bit of time and a lot of discussion. But again, it's a group decision. You won't want to come in, you wouldn't want to be the one solely responsible for setting those growth measures as a grade level and then be held accountable just for that one measure. If everybody else is doing it for you, it helps out. So make sure that you take advantage of that when we get to that point. And then the rationale for growth, you can sort of start putting that together. You know how much your kids are going to grow based on the trend data. If you look at what you do right now, again, there aren't many numbers associated with that. So you need proof that you're doing what you're doing. So that last part, the rationale, is going to be a little bit harder to do at this point. And that's this handout. I'll show you the website where you get this, but basically they have great blocks. There we go. Puberty setting in again. There's great blocks in each one of these boxes that you can just start typing in your SLOs, and then you can save it to your desktop. So this is a very user-friendly document on the state webpage. And here they are. So these are two websites, and I can forward you this PowerPoint so you have this. I don't expect you to write that down because that's just crazy. But when you get to these two websites, the first one, this is the local measures. It goes through everything that you need to know. Here's the overview of SLOs. Here's the guidebook, everything you need here. Sample writings of SLOs, and I'll show you some of those in a little bit. And who you can contact if you don't trust me. There's other people around here, obviously, that are doing this for a living. So all the information here, this is the basic page, and then this one is the sample of the student learning objectives, which I'll show you in a little bit. But again, it has it broken down by, let's go into math. I've done this one a few times. When you click on math, it gives you a grade 1 example, an elementary example, and a high school, middle school example. The bad thing about this site, anybody can submit their SLOs, whether they're good or not. The nice thing is, though, they do put comments on what they should improve on underneath. So when you look at the math one was not very well done at the high school level. And when you look at this, what they've done to make sure that people aren't saying, hey, this is a great one, we should just follow this. Let me zoom that in a little bit here. It's hard to see, but it says the fourth quarter was created and reviewed by the math teachers. They don't think that this teacher actually talked with the other math teachers to make it. They think they just went out on their own. They also did a 25-question multiple choice assessment. Multiple choice in and of itself is not good enough. They want you to have a range of questions, and I'll show you that when we get to the assessment piece. The multiple choice questions are one type. They want to have fill in the blank, they want to have essay, they want to have a whole bunch of things that show depth of understanding. So his 25-question multiple choice test for the algebra class isn't going to make it. And then I'll have to go back and rewrite it. So that's obviously not anything he wants to do. All right, let's go back. All right, so today, here's what we're gonna do. I already talked more than what I wanted to begin, but I had to set that stage to make sure that you guys are comfortable with where our steps are. The first thing we have to do as a grade level is to determine which standards are the most important. And this is one of those things that when you talk to the state trainers, they even give you a different message on how many standards you should have. One person I listened to, and they wanted to argue with me up and down, that you pick two standards to go by. And those are your two SLOs. My counter to that is, what if you test one of those SLOs and you find out your kids are really good at it, and they come in at 85% knowing the topic? How much room for growth do you have? And then what are you gonna do to find that other SLO? So the other extreme is you would test the entire curriculum, which again, is way out there. When you think about like language arts in the high school, they have 72 standards. You're gonna test all 72. How many questions will that test be? How long will it take to grade that test? And then use that data accordingly to make sure that it matches up with standards. So the recommendation that's probably the most accepted is you find anywhere from 4 to 8 in that range of standards you feel are the most important standards for that topic at your grade level. So if you can find 4 to 6 standards that transcend from one grade level to the next that you know are important, and you know that they're gonna grow from the time they enter your room until they leave, that would be a great standard to start with. So off the top of my head, I can't think of, I'll use the reading, I think it's a reading informational text. There's one that is reading in a social study content area. There's something about that, I can't remember the exact terminology. That's great because not only can you then hit it in language arts, but you can also hit it in social studies. So you can double dip on that one standard. So if there are things that you can integrate into other parts of your curriculum, that's going to help you reach that standard. And in that same regard, if there's another teacher in the building that they go out and see and they also hit that topic, they are now helping you reinforce and grow your kids. So you're going to try to pick those strategic standards that are hit more than once in different areas of the building. If you can do that, it makes your job a little bit easier. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to develop our standards that we feel are the most important. Then we'll begin to develop the actual assessments, and I'll show you questions and how that should work. And then we're going to create a list of data needs. One of the things I will tell you off the top, if we're looking for OAA scores and OGT scores and all standardized testing, right now, my teachers are panicked. They're going to have to go student by student and look through each one of their databases to figure out how well they scored. There is an Excel spreadsheet out there with everybody's name and their scores on it. We just have to make it accessible to everybody. And if that's something that we can do to make your job easier in this process, that's what we'll do. I've already talked to the high school counselors. They're putting that Excel spreadsheet together right now for our teachers because realistically, they could have 90 people. They have to be looking at their student growth measures and gather data on all 90 by clicking one individual at a time would get a little old and make this process much longer than what it needs to be. So here are a few examples. I'll show you the elementary example, and you have to bear with me. Even though I'm an elementary certified teacher, it's been a while since I've been in the elementary classroom. So when I pull up my idea of what is important, you can take that with a grain of salt. It's the process that I'm working on. You guys are the experts in your grade level. I'm going to treat you like that. I'm not trying to pretend to be an elementary school teacher because you guys do way too much. All right, so up here I have listed my high school, middle school example. That's all of our math classes at the high school. They're going to have to come up with standards for each one of those as a department, which is overwhelming just looking at it. They created the classes, they teach the classes, they probably know the standards fairly well. Just like I'm sure you know the standards for reading at your grade level fairly well. So it might seem like a daunting task, but I think realistically when you look at what you know about the standards already, you could probably tell me generally what standards you could hit right now that are really, really important. So which ones are the most important? Do the standards listed lead or follow into another standard from another class? So is there growth before and after with that standard? If there is, that's something that as a school you may want to decide that's an important standard. Is there data already out there that you can use to help drive this decision? Again, those OAAs and OGTs might be out there. So let's go to reading. I picked grade 2 reading informational text just as an example. Again, I'm not the expert. I just picked 5 that I saw, or 6 that I saw that I thought, they seem pretty important to me. So if those aren't the standards, that's fine. But the idea is I decided that those were the ones that I felt were most important. And when you look at what I put up there, a lot of it's just dealing with gathering information out of text. It's pretty basic, pretty basic stuff. So from there, I then created a very simple, again, I'm not the expert. These are probably very poor questions, you're probably laughing at me by the scope of the question itself. But the questions that I came up with, the most basic question is, what does contrast mean? Because one of the standards says compare and contrast. They don't know what contrast means. They probably won't answer the question well anyway. So you have to find out their baseline knowledge. That's a very basic question that you could ask, and it's a legitimate question to see how much they know. If they don't know contrast and you teach them contrast, congratulations, you just grew them. Okay? Now, the next 3 examples, the next 3 questions, basically they're giving grade level passages, below grade level passages, and above grade level passages to figure out how much they can actually pull out information. So if you gave that test, those assessments to your kids, how would they score before they walked in your room? And how would they score at the end? There's definitely a scope that you can follow with that because of the below grade level, at grade level, and above grade level to see how much they've actually grown. Is it possible that a second grader could pass this test 100%? Possibly, because again, I don't know the students well enough at that grade level. But if they could pass it 100%, then what question would they have difficulty with that deals with that topic? Because you want to see if they really are beyond what you're currently teaching, so you can then differentiate for them if you have to. All right? So this is going back to the standards. So if I go back and look at my standards, I'm going to develop my standards first, but then about 5 to 6 questions per standard. So if you're picking 4 or 5 standards and you develop 6 questions, that's about a 30-question test at the high school level. How you do that at the elementary school, again, if you have to read it to them and other options like that, you may want to consider numbers and how you're going to do that. Because those are questions, again, you're experts at, you know what your kids can handle, but also you have to make sure you get a clear picture. Pre-tests are very frustrating for kids. And I'm going to caution you, and we've thought about this a lot at Lakeside when we were developing these tests. When we actually implemented those tests at the beginning of the year, we thought they're going to come into school because they have 7 periods in the day. They're going to have 7 tests within that first week of school that they're not going to know anything about. Talk about frustration. So we came up with a plan. We'll do a test Monday, a test Wednesday, and a test Friday. Monday's math. Wednesday is the language arts. Then Friday is something else. And we did the same thing the following week. So 1 test, so they had 3 tests during a week. We thought it gave them enough downtime that they wouldn't have to be struggling one day after another for the first week. We were also not worried about the fact that how much are they actually going to learn in that first week that's going to change our growth measure data. You know, if we get to them to week 2, congratulations. If they grew that much in 2 weeks, you're a great teacher. Pat yourself on the back. But that first week is about setting your standards, your classroom environment, and getting started on what they know. So that's something as a school you're going to want to decide. How do you want to implement these pre-assessments so it's not overwhelming to the kids? And it gives you a clear picture. Because we just got done with OGTs, and by the time we hit social studies, our kids were done. Even with that little break we had in the middle, our kids were done by Friday. So we have to make sure that we're aware of their needs when they walk into our building. And also, just, you know, how the first week of school is. Do you really want to be testing during that first week and have to do data? And that's something as a school district you have to decide, or a school building you have to decide. All right. So, right now, you're going to get with grade level teams. Do you have groupings that you want them to do, or do you want them by building grade level? How do you want to, do you know? Because Wayne and Sally, I didn't. Okay. So grade levels will be sitting near each other in proximity, but you can stick by building. What I would recommend, because we are going to be doing shared assessments across the board, we'll have to make sure that we do have those discussions from building to building also. So step 1, we have to develop which standards are the most important at grade level. And again, I made that list, and how accurate that list is, I'm not sure. Let me go back to it. So in the elementary example, standards for math, reading, writing, science and social studies, computers, art, physical education. All those areas need to have a set group of standards that we are going to focus on. So in your grade level committee, you may want to decide, well, I'll do the social studies, you do the science, I'll do the math, blah, 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 however you want to do it. But we need to come up with, again, 4 to 8 standards that you feel are the most important standards for that topic at your grade level. Questions on what you have to do first? I can't hear you.
What if we have multiple grade levels in our class?
Then you have to just pick one and go with that. Yeah, because again, you personally are only responsible for 2 SLOs. If you know you want to target one grade level or another, or you want to do one in each, then split your time. That's a personal decision. I don't think I'd have any issue with it. Yes?
These 2 SLOs, like we keep a tested subject in area and a non-tested subject area. Do I have to do one for the tested and one for the non-tested, 2 for the non-tested? What is
That's more of a building level question, but what I would tell you is this. I would know that I have that tested area. Do you want to have another area that's not tested, that's designed by you, help grow what you're evaluated on? If you can design your own standards to make your test that you're evaluated on, that you know you're going to teach well, then you may want to have that other one that's in a non-tested area, just so you have a secondary group of data that shows you're doing your job well. Does that help you? So one of each.
non-tested and tested?
And again, when you look at the tested area, that's the state-driven assessment. If you're solely evaluated on state-driven assessments, is that what you want your OTES to reflect? And if not, then you would have your secondary design, your SLO design, that you and your staff help put together as your other option for data that shows you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's one of those strategic moves. Other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so we're thinking that maybe we should get together north and south and have the conversation about which standards we actually want to write the SLOs with, and then maybe divide and conquer. So today, to start, talk with, we want to integrate north and south so then we can start deciding where to go from there.
So with that being said, first grade, or do we have pre-K here? No. We have kindergarten. Kindergarten, why don't you just start in this area, we'll work our way through the tables here so we can sort of get in an area for grade levels. And again, all you have to do right now, you don't have to worry about questions, just decide on which standards are the most important one. We'll get the questions later. All right, so let's go ahead and get that organized. I have 30 to 45 minutes, but I'll gauge that based on your work.
What we're going to do today is give you some ideas so that you can go back to your classroom and use these so that if during your regular class or during that half hour that's added to the end of the day, and if you have looked on our website, you will find that Tracy Chantry has made a wonderful resource. She won't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you, this is all Tracy. Those of you who know me, it is not me. I am not a techie, but she's done a really good a good job of making this resource. If you have some questions, I would think that maybe if you let her know, I need something on such and such, she will find it for you. So you will be listening to her presentation, then going to different rooms. K and 1 will be K will be in Carol Bryant's room. 1 will be in Steve Reed's room. Holly, you take your group, and I'll tell you what your group is later. I believe down to your room, and then 4th and 5th, she'll tell you you'll be up in this area. If you have computers in the room that you can use those. If you need to go to the computer lab, we will be using 114, not 113, because the aides are there. Welcome. Here's Tracy Chantry.
Okay, so I know you guys are all probably on information overload from this morning, and
So I didn't want to stand up here and go through PowerPoints and give you more information. But my responsibility today is to give you information about the park assessment and also about project-based learning. So I'm going to give it to you in a way that will allow you to just kind of look at the information that I put up here. And then you'll also have a new teaching strategy to take back to your class. If you don't know already about reciprocal teaching, it's a really good strategy to use with, you could probably do it in any grade level with a little bit of adapting for the kids in their age. So our agenda, the things that we need to cover today, for me to give you more information about project-based learning and PARC, and that's going to be the first part of the day. Probably about half an hour. So if you have everyone got a card, so how this is going to work is that you're going to use this website, and I put the web addresses right here, northresources.weebly.com, so you can access it from your iPad, your phone, or you can also go into our lab or any of the classrooms in this building. And I'm trying to pair up a south person with a north person, so you will have a north person with a classroom, so you can end up in their classroom if you like, whatever you prefer. So the objective is to, if you have a card and you have the blue-green card, you're going to create a poster about PARC using the resources that I have put on this website, so you don't have to go looking for anything. And then if you have a yellow card, you're going to create a poster about project-based learning. So if you have a 1, if your card is 1, raise your hand. Okay, so Shannon has a 1, and there's a South person that should have a 1 too. Okay, so you guys will be partners, and you will make a poster about, does it say PARC on it? What color is it? Yeah, so PARC. Then you'll come back and get with another group that did the opposite, and you'll teach that person about the other concept. So PARC people will teach to project-based learning people will teach the PARC people. And that way, when you're all done, you have at least new information about PARC and project-based learning. That should all take about an hour altogether. You'll have a half an hour to make the poster and then half an hour to share. If it takes more or less, that's fine too. And then when you're all finished, you have the choice to go with your grade level or your subject area, whatever you prefer, and you can work on creating your own project-based learning experience for your kids, or you can work on flexible grouping, whatever works best for you, whatever serves your needs better. So let's see. So I just wanted to show you where the resources are. PARC is here. And this is a PowerPoint, a video, if you learn better if you're watching a video, although it's kind of long. Sample test questions are right here. For intervention specialists, if you click this, you'll get a PDF that has accommodations and modifications. And also they tell you what they offer for regular ed kids. So there are a lot of options for highlighting, and because this test is all going to be computer-based, which you've probably heard already. And a lot of the test-taking strategies we teach our kids have to do with paper and pencil, so they actually implement a lot of them with the computer. So it'll tell you about that. And then this is just if you click this, you'll go to the PARC website. So you can put any information you want on your poster. There's no way you can learn about everything in a half an hour. There's endless information. So just find something that you want to share with somebody else and put the information on there. And then project-based learning. Again, if you just click around, you'll find the information. Here's an actual example of something that I made in my reading endorsement class that integrates social studies, language arts, and technology. And it's considered project-based with choice and assessment and choice and process also. So that's really what the project-based is about, is giving kids choice with how they actually complete the project, and then giving them multiple ways to show you what they learned. So those examples are up there, or resources are up there for you. And then this is just information about differentiation and flexible grouping if you need more. There's the reading for math, K-3, and then there's a really good resource if you click that. So right now, you just have to find your person that has the same number, and then you can grab this poster board over there and markers, poster board over here in marker, and then you can go anywhere you want to kind of assemble the information and put it on the poster. So how much, do you think half an hour is too long to do that? No? Okay, half an hour is good? Do you want more than half an hour? Okay. Now that you guys are kind of coming around, and Joe's going to be late, so I hope he's nice name on Oh, really quickly, we have to have some evidence of our day for the state. So that's why we're doing some filming, we're going to be taking some pictures of the products and getting some feedback from you about the information. So if you want to, I don't know if I watch on what time is it? It's 20 after. So you want to come back here about 12:50, or is that too long?
I think it's going to take you some time. Make it meaningful for what you're doing. Because I think some of you have seen one of the strategies that Tracy's done in the classroom. Raise your hand if you've seen that. Raise your hand. What is this raising hand? Okay, good. Some of you already have seen it. You can help explain it to the other people, and then she's offered to kind of do a short lesson, or at least explain it to you. But the strategy that she used, I know she did more strategies, but this one she's done with third grade, and the third grade kids were just so excited that she taught them how to do this because they could do it during testing. And I think the fourth grade reacted the same way. In the fifth grade, now I have teachers coming to me saying, hey, do you know that strategy that Mrs. Chantry, could they come to my room? So it worked with boys and girls in the district she worked with. I probably shouldn't say district. But with seventh grade at-risk students, and those kids passed their test. So we're going to lead your brain here on all the
Toward
things
the
that
end
you
of the
did.
day, if anybody wants to see that, like from 2:30 to 3, I could do a little short tutorial on that for anyone that wants to see it. But right now, go ahead and find your person and get your materials, and then we'll come back here in 30 minutes.
There we go.
But yeah, I definitely think we should define it and put it on there. What did you click on?
Oh, I went to PowerPoint.
Okay. I went to the ideas. Let me go on the PowerPoint.
So,
PARC stands for Partnership for Assessment of Readiness of College and Careers. Okay, about PARC. Get the poster. And we will put that down right here.
those block letters, nice.
There's different bird baths and fountains, and the students used art as a medium to, construct these different various bird baths. And they did just a whole project where they would learn about the birds and construct their own bird bath. So do you see how they brought the whole picture, and it was all student-led, where it was the interest of the students. I've also seen it with like roller coasters.
What was that?
They
Common
replace
Core?
outdated and ineffective tests.
Hold on. It'd be cool if PARC was in Common Core. There's an R, there's no A.
Assessment.
Huh?
Could you use assessment
No.
for the A? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Common Core assessment, do it. A-S-S-E-S-S-M-E-T.
MENT.
All right, so PARC, I don't have a P. Please.
Partnership.
No.
Why? Well, that's
Common Core assessment partnership? I need a P in the word. I was gonna make the word PARC in a different color in Common Core assessment. Come on, I got my teacher brain on.
Professionalism.
No, I don't think that works.
Proactive.
I'll just write it. So how do you want to word that?
Just like that.
Mr. PARC score will now be used in 2- and 4-year public colleges as entry level and credit bearing. So not only your ACT and SAT, your PARC score.
PARC assessments for the next generation.
Yeah.
Show us your PARC assessment. Yeah.
Hello.
So, and then high school.
Two formal assessment being developed along the park system. All right, maybe that's to the screen.
So then they would take their slow and then performance based. Oh, so they've got two types, the written and the performance assessments, speaking and listening. So they split it up into those three
Because in the park
categories.
too, it's not like one test. It's, I believe, it's multiple tests.
Yeah, that's kind of what they're saying. They have the different categories there for it.
And then some of them are optional.
Okay. I didn't know that part.
And
You're done here, man.
Yeah.
So then we think.
I can't put when we think. Let's put pilot programs.
Pilot programs in effect now. Rollout date? Question mark? We weren't
Pilot
sure.
programs are coming out now.
Yeah. And then full implementation? Question mark.
possibly use things. Possibly print this page and put it on our poster. Hey, good idea.
Okay, so we want, do you have your own printer?
No, not that one. That's gonna go to.
Okay, no, it's not.
There's just no other. It's gonna go to the staff lounge library.
Okay, so I want,
And then we can do the non-summers as well. And then we compare the difference between the diagnostic and the mid-year. So that's the two components there.
let's try the science in fifth grade. See if there's, it's a study.
Exactly what we have written down.
Just kind of flooded.
2014-15 test. All right, that's what.
So we have some more footage of this activity. Bill and Sarah are going to explain their poster. And then
Okay, we did PARK, and we called our poster Park It, and it stands for Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers.
Okay. It's for grades K through 12, and 46 states are in the process or have their implementing PARK assessment.
We have a pie here because there's 4 assessments. 2 are non-summative, and they're the chocolate pie, and those are optional. And the cherry pie are 2 summative tests, which are not optional.
And it supports the Common Core, and it's for the mathematics test and English, language, arts.
So it gives parents reliable data to see where their children are. So we drew a family.
And it's going to be computer-based starting 2014, 2015.
We drew that, or this little caption here is the handicap sign, but the test supports all students, and all students have access to things like a highlighter, directions read aloud, a spell checker, a writing tool, and they can flag items. There were many more, but that's what we got.
behind them, there's the PDF that has the many more on it that they were just talking about. So if you read that document, it tells you all the things for and for special education.
Oh, and it's computer-based.
Said
Oh, good.
Thank you, guys. Is there anyone in the blue that would want to share?
We have project-based learning for kindergarten.
So our definition for project-based learning at the kindergarten level was students apply multiple intelligences to problem solve, starting at their independent knowledge levels and then grow to higher level thinking levels. So an example to apply that through project-based learning is we selected just how does your garden grow as an example because that was the best way to apply all 4 of the content area standards. And you could start with language arts, selecting literature, a book such as Muncha Muncha Muncha, or what is the one about Patches? Mrs. Patton's.
Well, Mrs. Patton's Patches was a really cool website we found that gave many kindergarten examples, what you would need for a working farm.
What you would need for a working farm. And then through social studies, you could talk about communities and the different areas where you could have a garden or have a farm in the different areas. And then through science, you're talking about the growth cycle and the weather cycle, and those are standards that spiral in and out through first and second grade as well. And then for math and measurement, you can tie it back into a book, Muncha Muncha, where you're talking about what kind of things would you be growing in your garden, and then if different animals were eating the vegetables out of your garden, what would you need to do? This is more of the project-based. What kind of things would you need to do to protect your garden? Would you be building a fence to protect your garden? How would you measure it to build your project? What kind of things would you need to grow? How would you grow them? Would you actually be growing a garden? Could you do a classroom-based garden where you could grow things in your window? If certain insects and other things you do it, how could you do it naturally and organically? And the biggest thing we learned from research on this is that students need to be engaged to use their voice and their choice when they're doing project-based learning projects.
Thank you. So now, just so you can get a little more information, you would find the person that had the other number and the other color, if I did this right, and the 4 of you can go together and just share information. And we don't have to do that for very long if you don't want to. I know you have really important things to start, applying all of these concepts to. So how about if we do like a 15-minute share? You can go with your partners and share. And all the information will always stay, it'll always be here on this website, and you can Google it and get tons of information, but I just found things that I thought were helpful and put them all in one place. So either way you do it is fine. And so now find the person with the corresponding number who did the opposite concept.
Around, I was really impressed. You're a really good working team, and to mix it all up like this, it sounded very productive. So thank you so much. I would hope that you take some ideas back. I will just tell you from my experience of taking that test last year, of taking one of the tests, it was difficult. So we are going to have to change our thinking around a little bit so that these boys and girls don't get so upset, and our instruction is going to have to be different. So kind of try to get your mindset, take one of those tests, and you'll see. I know a group we listened to over here said, how about their technology skills? And we do have 2 labs here, but even to get those kids through to take that test is going to be difficult. We've already thought about those schedules, but even learning to cut and paste, and the staff here knows I have a great deal of difficulty with that. A couple of really funny stories, and I've been doing that for several years. So a lot of our boys and girls don't have computers. So just don't get all upset about it, because we're all going to be in the same boat with our kids. And we need to make them feel as least stressful as possible. They love computers, and they'll catch us onto it much quicker than somebody my age. When you go to your next group, we want you to talk about flexible grouping and some of the things that you might be able to do here, especially in the upper grades, because there are some great resources that Tracy has on the website for you, and you are doing lots that you need to share with one another. So we're going to go to grade levels, and kindergarten will go to Carol Bryant's room or Janice's, whichever you want. And first grade will go into Steve's room. And I want you to talk about those of you who are already doing flexible grouping. You were asked to bring data with you, because every time we do something, it's based on data and the needs of the students. Flexible means I might have this group of 5 students, and Tracy might have 10, and my 5 students might move right up into her group because they are progressing. She might have a couple up there that need some more intervention, and she may move those down. If you have 4 grade levels, then you could have 4 different groups. The one that Mrs. Arky has, where are you? She is working with first grade, so she may only have the Title I students for obvious reasons. Okay, but the rest of you, you can mishmash together, teach to your strength. If you're especially good with enrichment, please take those top kids. If you are especially good with that lower group, please take that group and work together. I was told to tell Sal that you will have some intervention or aids with you in your flexible grouping. Any questions about the flexible grouping? That last half hour of the day, we want it to be meaningful for the students. We feel like it is it's a gift. Right. And that will work with boys and girls, since we have them here anyway, to have that extra 30 minutes rather than trying to tack it on at the end of the year. And you and I both know that when we have to tack those days on, it's not instructional like we would like it. We'll go around to the different rooms. You, 4th and 5th, if you want to pick a room in here.
Yeah, 4th and 5th want to stay in the 5th grade hallways and 4th grade hallway, just so
We already know where you are.
Yeah.
Not that we're watching your every move, but we really are impressed with how well you're working together and the ideas that you're sharing. Put them back at the end. At the end, we'd like, as a project, don't make a great big thing, but if you could just tell us what you discussed and what you decided in your groups, we would appreciate that, and I know Angela would.
So maybe just write who you work with and what you're implementing. If you're working on flexible grouping, just take a couple notes about that, or if you're doing project-based learning, so that she has a product of what we did for the last, collaborative hour and a half or something. And thank you for being good sports about the teaching, the switching teaching thing, because I didn't want to stand here and talk and read a PowerPoint for another 2 hours. That I don't think that would have helped anybody. And just like kids, when you teach somebody else something and teach yourself about something, you remember it more, I think, than if you just listen to somebody talk. So thank you for being cooperative, and go ahead and get with your groups.